Call the City Plan Board meeting for February 27th to order. Would Mr. Castillo, would you call the roll, please?
Robert Ackerman,
Here.
Stephanie Sutton,
Here.
Jason Hurst, Joshua Nay,
Here.
Jason Sanchez,
Here.
Rans Torres,
Here.
Tina Certain. We have a quorum.
If you've reviewed the agenda, could we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? Can we have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I did have a change to the minutes.
Okay.
Because there was one thing, the item 2022-707, petition LD 22-000130 TCH. The vote said 5-0, it was 4-1. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, and it's weird because further down it said it was a 4-1 vote, but it didn't note it in the notes up above. So do I just?
Can we then have a motion to
with- approve with
approve
those
the
changes?
amended minutes, please?
So moved? Do I have to say all that?
That'll be fine. All those in favor?
I'll second
Aye.
that. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do we have any public comment on issues not on our agenda at this time? Seeing none, Mr. Castillo, would you read in old business, please?
Item 2022-707, text amendment center line of street setback measurement. This is a petition for a text amendment that would remove the requirement that street setbacks be measured from the center line of a street. And presenting with us today, we have a planner, Bades Massey.
Good
Welcome, Ms.
evening.
Massey.
Good evening, Chair Ackerman and members of the City Plan Board. Again, I'm Bades Massey of the city's Planning Division, which is within the Department of Sustainable Development. As read into the record, I'm here tonight to once again present to you petition LD 22-000130 TCH. As you are aware, this is a city-initiated petition involving the removal of Section 30-6.8 from Article 6 of the city's Land Development Code. This particular section addresses the requirement to measure the front setback on substandard streets from the center line of the substandard street. We met with you back in December of last year, which is the time that we first brought this petition before the City Plan Board. And the City Plan Board agreed to continue the petition and asked staff to consider two things. One was to consider the possibility of having a minimum street setback or a minimum street width. The second was to consider the possibility of having a variance option included within this section of the city's Land Development Code. After that meeting, the City Planning Division, Gainesville Regional Utilities, and the Public Works Department met, and we discussed at length various options, the pros and cons of leaving this section in the code or removing it from the code. At that meeting, we decided that additional time was needed. Therefore, when we came back to the board in January, we asked you for additional time and to continue the petition. And the petition was continued by the City Plan Board to this meeting. Again, if approved, the impact of this petition will be citywide. The language currently within Article 6 of the city's Land Development Code is as follows. And in the language, there's a description of the standard width of various roadway classifications. So if the plan board should recommend that this be removed from the code. All of the language would be removed, subject to city commission approval. On the screen now is an example of a site plan that this particular requirement was applied to. And what it shows is a single-family residential structure on a local street that is substandard. So application of section 30-6.8 would look something like, excuse me, I'm about to describe. The blue line would represent the middle, or what is determined to be the center line of the substandard local street. Let me go back. What you don't see is a very blue overlay, and I'll point to it with the pointer. In this area represents 1/2 of what a 50-foot wide local street would look like if applied on this side of the center line of this substandard local street. The dashed line represents the end of the 25-foot width. Obviously, on the opposite side of the center line, if this right-of-way had been built to a standard width of 50 feet, there would be an additional 25-foot wide area on the opposite side of the center line. Where this half of the 25-foot side of a local street width falls, from that point into the lot would be where you would measure the front yard setback. In this particular case, for this approved site plan, the 20-foot setback started here and it ended up here. So the front of the building could not encroach into the front yard setback as required by the zoning district. So the front setback would not begin here at the dash line, but the front yard setback area would be in the area between the dash line and the front of the building. And as indicated by the batch stamp seal, this was an instance where this particular requirement was successfully applied to a building permit application for the construction of a single-family residential home. So when staff met again in February, that being the City Planning Division, Gainesville Regional Utilities, and the Public Works Department, we discussed again the various options. And it was determined that tonight we would recommend to the City Plan Board that our recommendation be consistent with what is desired by the City Commission, which is to remove this section from the City Land Development Code. The benefit in doing so would be that it would help in expediting the development review process, in that when building permits are submitted or applications for development plans, this particular section of the code would not apply to every permit involving a lot on a substandard street. Right now, there's no opportunity for a variance from this requirement, and it applies in every case where there is new construction proposed on a lot on a substandard street, and it applies to the front yard. If it is removed, it would allow the city to utilize its current development review process consisting of many departments, including the Public Works Department, which manages city right-of-way, and the city's Department of Transportation, to be able to decide on a case-by-case basis, as needed, the application of the city's adopted design standards. And in cases where those roadways are under the jurisdiction of Alachua County or the state, because the Public Works Department has served as our lifeline to those other jurisdictions, it would then be an opportunity on a case-by-case basis, as needed, for our Department of Transportation or our Public Works Department to communicate with those other jurisdictions on a case-by-case basis. We would not have a bottleneck of building permits, waiting on people to decide what to do with this requirement. This requirement predates my tenure with the city of Gainesville. And it was probably adopted at a time when we did not have a design manual like we do now. We have the 2015 Engineering Design Manual now, which is under the jurisdiction of our Public Works Department. We also have a review process in place consisting of numerous city departments who are looking at the same building permit applications, the same applications for development plan review. So it is the opinion of staff that this would be a positive move on the part of the city to remove this section from our city land development code, because the purpose and intent of this section we should be doing anyway on a daily basis. This is part of our job, to communicate with one another and let us know where there may be a roadway widening proposed that a proposed new construction might be in conflict with. And not just proposed right-of-way, but any right-of-way. Every permit we review, every development plan we review, we should be talking to one another and offering guidance on where there is the potential for a problem. So again, if we lose this section of the code, we should not lose the oversight, the consistency, and the presence in our review process to ensure that what this section was intended to do years ago is still being done. And so with that, I'd like to conclude staff's presentation, answer any questions that you might have. And again, I'd like to reiterate that consistent with what the City Commission is asking, staff's recommendation is to have this section removed from the City Development Code.
Thank you, Ms. Massey.
Thank
Questions
you,
from the
Mr.
board? Ms. Sutton.
So I have a question, because there was a suggested land development code revision in the backup, which the part, like I could see that or the appropriate distance to be determined by the city manager or designee was added, which I like. But it didn't really address like the two things we mentioned. It did change some of the labels and it changed one of the numbers. So this like proposed revision, can you explain sort of the thinking behind that? And it still doesn't give a variance. It doesn't like, so I'm just wondering, can you explain a little bit of the suggested revision that we have in our packet?
Well, thank you, Member Sutton, for bringing that up, because in your backup, there was discussion about alternative language. What if the plan board decides that, well, they don't want to go with staff's recommendation, they are not in agreement with what the city commission is wanting done. And so we provided suggested language, and it was right where it states, the following lot and building requirements shall apply in all zoning districts as determined by the city manager or designee. So then there was the thought, who is that?
Mm-hmm. There's
Who
a lot
will
of
that
places
be?
the code refers to that, though.
I understand.
That's not
But
uncommon.
in the development review process, trust me, there will be the question of who will that be? Who is that? And so what comes to mind is, who does the city say manages its roadways? And that is the Public Works Department. So it's already clear who manages our roadways. Who do we look to determine when there will be roadway widenings or roadway improvements? The authority is given to that department. And so we'll work with them to ensure that whatever was intended by Section 30-6.8 continues in the development review process. The other thing we learned was that with the help of Mr. Singleton, our director, interim director of the Public Works Department, the roadway classifications, the roadway classifications have changed, and so have some of the widths, standard widths of some of those roadway classifications. So it seemed to us that this section is obsolete. And we already have what we need to do what we need to do to ensure that new construction in the city is consistent with roadway projects. And so to help expedite building permits, development applications, we think that the best choice would be to remove it from the city's land development code.
Anybody else?
If I might add a little bit. And really, just as an addition, not a lot of change has changed from what we presented to you all the last time we brought this up, which is that from a planning setback issue, we believe that the city is best served by removing these provisions. However, there are and have been concerns about working with GRU and Public Works, which you all brought up the last time that we brought this to you. And so because of those concerns, we coordinated, reached out to GRU and Public Works for what can we do as far as presenting something to you all as, what will work the best for the city. So here we are, again, planning and sustainable development's original recommendation has not really changed. We believe that we can still accomplish what the city needs by removing this, but also we need to say and should say that GRU and Public Works had concerns with that and offered what you see in your backup, or should see in your backup, as guidance for adding a or designee. And really, functionally, what that means is when we practice this, the language is removed. However, if there is a functional and reasonable use or need for that, that Public Works and GRU is still able to use or exert, what they need to get the utilities and the services provided in those situations. So we think that this does that. There's also the alternative in your backup that says if we need to change the language to this to specifically say that there is, or designee, then we're willing to do that also and incorporate that also into the code language. But again, what we think is the cleanest or the best thing to do is to remove it entirely, but also understanding that there are needs and concerns that need to be addressed. We feel like those are still there and that they will still be addressed. But if the plan board and then, of course, ultimately the city commission feels like they need a little bit more comfort or language comfort about structure for who is or can come into requiring these, then we've presented that language back up for you as well.
Ms. Sutton?
So I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like Public Works and GRU feel like they have enough other mechanisms through their codes to get the space that they need if improvements are planned at some point in the future to accomplish what they need, whether it be through easements or just working with the standard setbacks. Because there's some side conversation, and we may get into that a little bit later, about reducing setbacks overall. And so when we're talking about increasing density and we're talking about decreasing setbacks in some of these older neighborhoods where the infrastructure doesn't match the current requirements, I just want to be sure that if improvements are required in the future, we have space for that to serve, whether we're adding more units in those neighborhoods, whether we're decreasing setbacks, whatever we're doing. I just want to be sure that these roadways can be improved to the extent that they need to, whether it's a water line or a sewer line that needs to be upgraded, whether we want to add sidewalks. I just want to be sure that GRU and Public Works feel comfortable that they have other mechanisms to accomplish those things. And I know they do that a lot through easements. So as long as they're comfortable with that, I'm comfortable removing this section. That is my big concern.
Chair Ackerman, we do have representatives from the city's Public Works Department and Gainesville Regional Utilities here tonight. If they would like to speak to this item, they are available. But again, I'd like to reiterate to you that if there is an issue with space allocation during the development review process, that is why oversight, presence, and consistency is needed, because that is the time, the ideal time to raise those issues and address them. And that is what is occurring in the development review process. So without this section, those considerations never leave the development review process.
Mr. Singleton.
Good evening. Brian Singleton, City Engineer, Acting Public Works Director. Based on the feedback from the Plan Board, I do have to concur with Forrest. This would be the city's recommendation moving forward. However, there would be particular situations where a roadway might not be directly aligned in the center of the right-of-way, or might not even be in the city's right-of-way, where you would have a potential setback issue, where you might have somebody wanting to place a structure basically on the edge of pavement. Completely eliminating this section would create an issue in that situation. So the alternate language to me would be the cleanest mechanism of having an opportunity to require more of a setback in a situation like that. Otherwise, the basic minimum setbacks in the code for all the other locations provide enough space for public works, and we can work with that. But in those rare instances, in a lot of the historical areas where the road is not necessarily in the right of way, we could end up with an issue.
And just as a follow-up, do you have another mechanism to solve that issue in those cases? I mean, would you ask for a roadway easement? Would you just ask for a sidewalk easement? Do you have another mechanism to get the building off of directly the pavement, or do you need this as a mechanism?
Depends on the zoning district. So, in certain areas where we can require a site plan and require a roadway to be brought up to standards, and yes, we have a mechanism. In the other building permit situations, I'm not immediately aware of a mechanism.
So it sounds like having the city manager designee language inserted in there is something that helps solve this problem regardless of where it is.
Based on the presentation, the quickest delivery of projects, which is a goal for the city, would be to strike the language. And we would have to work on a case-by-case basis with property owners to ensure the other city's interests are met.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for staff?
Hi, Barbara Meisner, GRU Water Wastewater Supervising Engineer for New Development. So I spoke, if this is removed, then we fall under, was it section 4, where it's transect zone and non-transect zone. Mm-hmm. For the most part, GRU does not have a problem with this and can work with this. especially in these single-family developments. Where GRU runs into issues is in the transect zones where there really is no setback. The setback, they can build up to the right-of-way in many instances, and so there is no place for utilities to go. There's no place for transformers, there's no place for water meters, there's no place for wastewater to go. So we can get easements, that is a possibility, but it is at the whim or the discretion of the developer. The developer does not have to grant those, but if there's no place to put the utilities, they pretty much have to. So we are in favor of this, having additional language with the discretion of the city manager or his or her designee to decide on these situations if we're going to use that, the center line separation. I understand many of the projects that have been done in like the Porter's neighborhood where there is a substandard road. It's been a single family and we've just used the setback of 10 feet for a single family in the past, and that has worked very well. And I'm in favor of doing those in those situations, but they're having this in place gives us a little bit more options as far as having some additional setback if it is needed. So for the most part, we're on board with this and agree that it is, for expedience purposes, the best way to go for the city. But there are going to be instances where it is going to be problematic, and we would like to have the alternative language in place.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll open this to the public hearing for public comment. If anybody has comments on this issue, please speak. Mr. Coffey?
Mr. Chair, Andy Coffey. I spoke with you last month, and I'll quickly recap. I've built 50 or 60 single-family infill houses in the city over the last 10 years, and my prior experience with this section of the code is that it has been waived by staff in every instance, and so the alternative recommendation before you sounds a lot like a reversion to the way things have been prior to the strict enforcement of this section of the code, which came about, I don't know, about a year ago. And as a result of that, I have permits that are being held up, have been held up now for at least 8 months. And by the time that this becomes effective, those permits will have been held up for at least a year. This has come before the plan board now 3 times. This is the 3rd time after a unanimous vote and consideration by the city commission. I just want to ask you all to please take action on it tonight. Thank you.
Any other comment? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for comments or a motion. Ms. Sutton.
I am inclined to support the suggested code revision that allows for the city manager or designee. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the suggested code revision, not elimination of the section, for LD 22-000130.
We have a motion to approve the alternative language. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Massey. Mr. Castillo, can we plunge on? Tree mitigation.
Item 2023-166, Tree Mitigation Funds Revision. This item is a request to change the Tree Mitigation Fund Code to allow for more flexibility on how the funds are used.
Good evening. I'm Dave Conser. I'm your city arborist. Really glad to be here. It's represents to me something near and dear to my heart, and something I think that can make a huge difference for our city's trees. So let's see here. I don't know how to advance the slide.
It's a little tricky. I think you got to aim. Yeah.
Okay, to
Thank
the
you.
rescue.
There you go. Aim high.
Okay, so we're talking about proposed code revision to how we can spend the tree mitigation fund. This can make a big difference for us. Right now, the purpose of the tree mitigation fund is to take in monies primarily from tree removals and then expend those monies in planting trees and enhancing Gainesville's urban forest. The funding balance that we know of at the end of fiscal year 21 was $6.1 million. This fund has been going up dramatically because of ongoing development in Gainesville, and we want to be good stewards of the expenditures of this fund. We want to plant trees. We want to enhance Gainesville's urban tree canopy in a way that responsibly uses the fund in a good stewardship manner, and we want to try to keep up in those expenditures at least in a somewhat comparable degree to which inputs are coming in. Gainesville is a tree city USA. We all love our trees. Gainesville has the highest canopy percentage of any city in all of Florida. However, on an absolute value measurement from the last urban forest assessment, we can see that the amount of canopy is dramatically going down. We are headed downward, and we would like to do something about that to the best of our abilities. If you look at ArcGIS numbers on the square miles of tree cover by year, it actually peaked in 2002, probably trees growing and doing well, and then we've watched it steadily decline at a pretty steady rate in recent years. So historically, we've not been able to keep up with the inputs to the tree mitigation fund in our expenditures. And these proposed revisions aim to solve that and do a much better job of managing our urban forest and just having a great urban forest here. I cannot plant enough trees in the city's right-of-ways and parks to expend this fund. Now, it is allowed to, for instance, purchase conservation lands within the city limits. That can be a good way to expend these monies. They purchased the Weiss Tract years ago, and that spent a lot of money and conserved a lot of urban forest. But we want to also ensure that that's a more realistic and possible situation and facilitate that through these revisions to the code so that we make that process easier situation as well. So the current code is this right here, at least the part about expenditures of the tree mitigation fund. It says mitigation payment shall be based on tree appraised value or as otherwise specified in this code. Payment shall be made prior to the approval of a final development order or prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any development requiring only building permits. Mitigation payments received by the city shall be deposited in the tree mitigation fund, which must be used in accordance with this subsection. This fund may be used for new tree plantings associated with public improvement projects or for the preservation of trees through the purchase of conservation lands, but shall not be used for tree maintenance or toward the installation of new trees that would already be required for a development. In addition, this fund may be used for an ecological assessment of the urban forest every 5 years and for an update of the urban forest management plan every 10 years. You have in front of you a handout for the proposed changes, the new proposed code. It follows in line with the old code, strikes some language. It has the offsets for tree mitigation payments still in there. And then it changes when we start talking about Section B, use of the tree mitigation funds. The intent of the tree mitigation fund is to directly support the expansion and improvement of a healthy and sustainable urban forest by planting and establishing high-quality trees, as well as providing for the management and preservation of the city's urban forest. Now, this is the proposed code, and you have that in a handout. We've been working on this for quite some time with the Tree Advisory Board. They've been real helpful with this, staff, and including legal taking a look at this. And we've come up with something that they support and have agreed with and voted on twice. And these code changes would make a huge difference. They'd be a paradigm shift in how we can expend the tree mitigation fund and it'd make a great difference in our tree canopy, urban forest. So some of the items are the same as it's been in the code. Some are revisions. Some are completely new. So I'm going to go ahead and go through each one of these fundamental 9 things that we're talking about changing, and we'll have a chance to talk about those. So in A, it speaks of the tree mitigation funds may be used for the following: new tree and native landscape planting and establishment on city-owned property, including purchase of trees, irrigation supplies, mulch, equipment, staking materials, fertilizer, and innovative and or engineered tree planting materials and techniques. This is a lot similar to what's already in the code as far as tree planting. We have added native landscape planting because we believe that we want to restore the whole urban forest ecosystem, not just plant trees. We want to help the native shrubs and native ground cover as well. We want to do the whole system and not just plunk a tree down. So we look at the whole system when we do that. And we've codified some of those allowable expenses just so that they're in the code and they're plainly obvious. Necessary costs. We've got some tree planting going on. Would you all like to discuss this item here, or would you prefer we go in all through the items and have discussion at one time?
Why don't you do the whole thing, and then things that catch our attention we'll bring up.
Okay, sounds great. So in B, we've added a new item, structural pruning of trees on city-owned property in accordance with industry standards. This is not our regular scheduled tree maintenance for clearance that we do on a continuing basis day in and day out. This would be looking at a tree and saying, how can we make this tree a great tree rather than a tree that might be okay or maybe even a danger or a problem in the future. So we want to do according to what the current research and current knowledge is in helping these trees to have great structure and to be great trees. And particularly starting out early after planting, be able to look at these trees and say, we don't want trees with 2 codominant trunks that at some point in time are going to split apart and become a hazard of our city trees. We want to take care of that through the Tree Mitigation Fund. This will enhance and really help our urban forest. In C, we talk about preservation of tree canopy with an emphasis on preserving high-quality tree species through the city's purchase of conservation lands and associated acquisition costs, including survey, fencing, appraisal, and invasive vegetation control. This is in the code, but we wanted to add some of these acquisition costs to enable these purchases to be more easily made. Part of the problem with acquiring lands, there's two problems that come up. One is there is an associated cost with getting that property properly into the city park system, and also some of those management costs. You know, if you acquire a property, you need to be able to manage it properly. And so we want to facilitate that through these code changes. And that's one of the things that enables these purchases and the idea behind this particular revision. In D, we have site preparation, planting, land management, invasive vegetation control, and or natural regeneration of the city's native forests. So whether we plant trees by human means or natural regeneration, because of the way we manage our forests, and particularly in our natural areas, this is going to create healthy urban forest. This is going to bring in high quality trees as we do this sort of thing. Prescribed burning being a great example of something that is an excellent tool for helping good quality trees to establish and to really help and improve our urban forest. This is very similar to what we already have in the code. An ecological inventory and or assessment of the urban forest every 5 years, and for an update of the urban forest management plan every 10 years. We wanted to specify that the ecological assessment would include an inventory. We've done assessments, and we want to also make sure that we're looking at what we have. You can't manage properly what you don't know what you have. And so what we want to do is we want to do inventories of city-owned trees in our right-of-ways and our parks that are in an urban setting. I don't anticipate going to Morningside Nature Center and assessing every tree in their native areas. But those trees that are within, say, 100 feet of structure or parking areas or grassy areas where people are going to congregate in those areas, to assess these trees and say, what species do we have? What's the size, diameter? What's the condition of those trees? So that we know, do we have a problem with certain trees? We find that out as we do this ecological analysis and inventory. And we will be able to manage that. We also can find tree planting spaces. Where are there opportunities in our right-of-ways and our parks to plant additional trees? And this would be a great tool for accomplishing that as well. But you have to know what you have in order to properly manage. In F, we have arboriculture, landscape architecture, engineering, and other professional services directly related to the development of the city's urban forestry projects. So these would be professional services that directly support a project, an urban forestry project that we want to install and push forward with. And so that is going to promote those projects. In G, we have reconfiguration, replacement, and relocation of streetscape and utility infrastructure necessary for the installation or preservation of high-quality trees on city property where the health of the trees and roots are prioritized, potentially using innovative and or engineered tree planting materials or techniques in partnership with other funding sources. So if we want to take care of some trees downtown, for instance, and we've got infrastructure, we've got hardscape, we have utility infrastructure that needs to be reconfigured, replaced, or relocated to properly take care of trees. Let's let the Tree Mitigation Fund handle that as part of that tree planting and preservation process. And we are saying that this will be in partnership with other funding sources. The Tree Mitigation Fund alone would not handle these costs, but there would be a partnership with other funding sources. So staffing type revision here, the cost of city employee, intern, and or contractual services directly for the items listed above. So currently the city horticulturist, 50% of his salary is paid through the Tree Mitigation Fund. We're just looking to make sure that we can do that sort of thing. There's our horticulturist busy planting trees. He's doing a great job. He really is. And we have purchase and supply of trees for planting on private property with a priority on replacement of invasive vegetation and establishment of high-quality trees and subject to adequate and appropriate oversight and accountability. The monies in the Tree Mitigation Fund came off of private property, private ownerships. Why can't they go back on private ownerships? Right now the code talks about public works type projects. What I would see here is rather than the city employees going on private property plant trees, to have a program where, for instance, we make sure we plant the right tree in the right place. We talk to our neighbors and we say, okay, where would you like to plant a tree? Okay, that's a great place. The right trees, right potential trees for that place are these right here. Which one would you like? Okay, here's a 15-gallon tree. Here's information on how to properly plant this tree, properly establish this tree. Let them plant the tree. If they can show, and this is just one potential way to do the program like this, if they can show in 6 months that, yes, that tree is thriving and doing well, here's 2 more trees, and go through the same process again. But to be able to put trees back, because if I can't plant trees or somehow get trees planted on private property, I don't have enough places to really help our tree canopy. I don't have enough ways to spend adequately the Tree Mitigation Fund the way I believe we should spend it. Now, there might be some questions about that. One question might be, is there a public benefit of trees on private property? And I would say absolutely, absolutely. These trees provide monetary benefits that we can actually put dollar values on, whether it's stormwater abatement, whether it's pollution abatement, whether it's reduced heating and cooling costs with the heat island effect, whether it's reducing health care costs because we have trees. All sorts of things can be monetarily determined from trees on private property. So those trees, even in someone's backyard, has a public benefit to the entire city. And we would let the private property owners plant the trees. I don't foresee my personnel going on private property to plant the tree. We go on private property at this point to evaluate trees when we need to, and so to evaluate a potential planting location and give advice about that, I think that'd be fine. We've developed some good materials on helping folks know how to properly plant trees and how to get them established, watered in, that sort of thing, and we would make sure that we communicated that. These changes would not include regularly scheduled right-of-way trimming for clearance, and it would not cover the installation of new trees that would be already required for development. That is would still remain in the code. Questions? Discussion?
Ms. Sutton?
I have a couple questions that weren't really covered, but it seems that there's more money in the fund than the city has been able to spend.
Yes.
And the number seems to get higher every time I hear it. So we're looking for new ways to spend the money. I would be curious to see, and you may know off the top of your head, do you have an average amount that you're collecting per year and an average amount that you are spending per year, or does it vary widely?
It varies widely. I can tell you that in recent times with the level of development that's going on in Gainesville, it seems to be, from what I hear the rumblings, it seems to be increasing quite rapidly. I hear my counterparts in the planning department, sustainable development, talk about an $800,000 check coming in for the VA clinic centers off of Southwest 34th Street, or $1 million from this development. And so I want to be able to be a good steward of those monies coming in and do a better job of adequately spending. And that would be my goal.
I would be interested in seeing perhaps a table of that, because I'm wondering if we need to look at a different section of the code where we're talking about the tree mitigation. Because if we're really collecting millions of dollars every year that we're not spending, and like I said, the last time I saw this number, and it's been years, it was like 2 million or 3 million, and now we've more than doubled that. I see those checks coming through my office as well. I know that they are huge. And I'd be curious to know, I mean, how much you're spending in an average year. Are you spending $1 million a year? Are you spending $500,000 a year? Are you spending $3 million a year? Because I know there's a huge amount coming in. I'd be curious about that, and if we need to look at the front end at all and adjust what, if you're getting too much money, maybe we need to look at being a little bit more fair on the front end. And one question you may or may not know, and I forget exactly where it fell. We had an issue a few years back with whether single-family homeowners building a house were having to pay the appraised value or not. Do you know if for a single-family building permit they're still having to pay appraised value, or was that fixed?
No, they do not. Now, a developer clearing that single-family dwelling initially, if there's not a single-family dwelling present, there may be some tree appraised value issue going on there. But once a single-family dwelling is established, then there's quite a nice break as far as what is required of those folks for taking trees out.
So not necessarily in a new development, but I know there was an issue on Habitat property. I know there were some private homeowners wanting to build on vacant lots throughout the city that had an issue because it was going to be $60,000 for a tree or $30,000 for a tree. In those cases, existing lots, not in new development, are people having to pay appraised value right now?
Well, it sounds like you may be referring to a code change that was recently made regarding low-income housing. So low-income housing, their mitigation payments are dramatically reduced. Instead of having to pay tree appraised value for things, they pay inch per inch for development of low-income housing. So their low-income housing is getting substantial, good break as far as the initial development of those places. But wherever
But
you already have a single-family dwelling established, then the mitigation costs to them are significantly reduced, way down.
If there was, I think you know where I'm going, Brian. If it, just a single family lot in an existing subdivision, vacant lot for some reason, somebody had an extra lot and they sold their house and they sold the extra lot separately, would that lot have to pay appraised value? And everything else is built out in that subdivision.
I honestly do not know. Public Works Department is not responsible for calculating those mitigation payments or collecting those payments. I don't know those sections of the code. Dave does not administer those sections of the
The
code.
answer is no.
Okay, so we fixed that.
Single family developing on a single family lot does not pay for that level of tree mitigation.
Okay, good. I was hoping we got that resolved.
Yeah, I think we did that.
Yeah,
Couple of
I
years
just
ago.
wanted to make sure we had like made the change. I would be curious to see the numbers because I think we may need to look at the front end. And I'm not saying we need to get rid of appraised value. I'm just saying we might need to adjust it.
So I can speak to the expenditure side of things.
Okay.
We are nowhere close to expending what we're collecting at this time. Some of that really has to do with turnover in staff in the Urban Forestry Division and in the Public Works Department. We have completely new staff. The way, looking at the code with new eyes, there were concerns with the language and historically how the funds were utilized. And that's why we're here today, to make sure that our expenditures are completely in line with what the code indicates. As Dave indicated, we're out of space to plant new trees. There is no more space in the right of ways. There is no more space in the parks, and it is very hard for us to acquire properties if we can't use the tree mitigation funds for any of those incidental costs. So we see a lot of pre-application meetings for the same property over and over again that have beautiful canopies on them and that don't ever quite seem to develop. That would be good opportunities to purchase, but we can't purchase them because we have no funds identified for all those soft costs. So that's the reason for the long list. We feel these are the most appropriate ways to expend these funds and to keep up with the revenues that are coming in, and to make sure that all of our spending aligns with the code.
I might.
But at this time, we are expending less than $500,000 a year.
Okay. Single projects that pay more than that.
Exactly. And, if with some of these substantial properties that are out there, we could be making purchases in that amount or more for some of these properties. The people we've approached to date, they got price tags on the properties excess of $1 million, but we're talking, 20-acre parcels and with transect zoning, which has a lot of development potential. So.
And if I can add, and I'm still struggling to, Juan, where's the button that I pushed? It's way behind my monitor and everything. Sorry. But to add to that, Brian obviously is the best for the expenditures, but if I could add on the planning side, of course, the purpose of the tree mitigation fees is not and has never been to extract some sort of dollar amount. It really is there to try to preserve the canopy, because our canopy provides resource value benefits, and it has benefits to the city overall. And so that fee is there to in one hand, discourage the reduction of the canopy, but also if there is a reduction of the canopy based off of a development that is valid through the land development code, then that there is that mechanism to have dollars that can support canopy creation. And what we're not doing very well right now is creating more canopy. And that is the chart that Dave showed you, is that our canopy is going down while our tree mitigation funds is going up. That is not the intent. That it was never the intent. What is being proposed and presented is more tools and more options for creating canopy. That's the purpose. That was the purpose of the funds and the extraction of the funds.
That was well said. I would just say that the whole idea of these proposed revisions is to help our canopy and to advance that canopy and advance the health of our urban forest just as much as possible. And these revisions will do that. And they'll make headway much better than we can right now.
Mr. Torres, oops, I'll get you back.
So I found the most interesting part of this policy proposal, item I, the purchase supply of trees for planting on private property. I'm curious what the scope is of item I, especially since there's language about replacement invasive vegetation. I'm in college, so I have an ecology background, so I am really interested in like how you would use like replacement invasive, like how would you use funds to replace invasive vegetation? Like would you go in and like remove like carpets or ardesia or like a camphor laurel and replace it with a tree, or is it not in the scope?
Yeah, I think the idea there is that we do have non-native invasive trees, whether it's a Chinese tallow tree or a China berry tree, various and sundry camphor trees, and getting those trees out of the way and putting something there that's native. I don't know that we're ready to spend money on private property to get rid of invasive ground cover and shrubs, but when we put these trees in, hopefully we can make some headway that way. But planting trees on private property, in my opinion, offers the greatest opportunity, because when you move past the right-of-way or move past parks and you move into private property, you have a tremendous opportunity to improve your canopy in those areas.
I'm curious about scope too. Like, are there other options proposed to like doing green roofs on top like the big apartment complexes in the area? Like Row on Fifth, for example, has like no like roof with like green roof, and I think that'd be a really good intervention in like those built-up areas.
Correct. The idea here is that private property would be everything except for city-owned property. So it would include businesses, commercial, apartments, condos, churches, HOA-owned areas, everything.
Okay.
So lots of scope. Lots of scope.
Ms. Sutton?
So it seems that we're sort of heading in a direction that the only way we're going to spend these millions of dollars is really purchasing land. I mean, obviously, I don't disagree with any of these other uses at all. And I don't disagree with purchasing the land either. I would be curious, and this may be more of a Brian question, if we've done this before and we've used tree mitigation money to purchase land to preserve the canopy, are we changing the land use and zoning to conservation? Is that getting transferred over to parks? Are we adding paths and making it like usable open space for our citizens? Or like, can you walk me through that a little bit? Because I think that's the direction that we're going to head here. I'm not opposed to that. I just want to understand what that process is, and like, are we creating sort of usable open spaces for citizens?
So yes, if we're purchasing a property with these funds, it will be there's already an established canopy with the right type of trees, or we have the opportunity to easily or quickly establish a canopy. These properties would be turned over to nature ops and parks for management, and they would be able to be used for passive recreation. Clearly, if we're purchasing it for a tree canopy preservation, then we would not be doing clearing for sports fields or anything of that nature. But yes, walking trails, open access to the public to enjoy that canopy, that urban forest, in nature ops inventory would be the intent. And yes, it would be placed, in some cases, under conservation. If at some point, if the city wanted to dispose of that property, the funds would have to be repaid back to tree mitigation, because since it was purchased with that intent, with those particular funds, it would have to stay with that purpose.
So I have a follow-up question then. In that case, if we are putting trails and potentially, some parking spaces in areas that we aren't going to impact canopy and things so that people can enjoy that, would it be helpful to use these funds for those improvements as well? Because, or in your sense, does parks just take over that funding and they put it on the list for wild spaces, public places, and you may buy the property next year and it gets improvements 5 years from now?
I don't see the rational nexus for using tree mitigation funds for parking lot, a trail, etc. Because those funds were collected for a canopy purpose. We have to stick to that canopy purpose.
Okay.
Yeah, keep in mind that two of these revisions directly address this and making the purchase easier in the first place by covering some of the associated costs, and then the management of those areas, the site preparation, natural regeneration, those kind of management techniques really assist nature operations in being able to acquire these properties and properly manage them, for them to feel real good about acquiring that property and for that to happen. So we've had a number of folks, a number of properties that are candidates, but they haven't been able to be purchased. And so these code revisions would facilitate that dramatically, in my opinion.
Mr. Sam.
And you're, just to interject also, you're right. The best way to spend millions of these dollars quickly is through good land purchases. You're right about that.
It's the only way you're going to spend this money. I mean, I've seen this fund growing. And I see the checks coming in.
Right.
Mr. Sanchez.
I'm curious to know if you project that if we go forward with these changes, that you will eliminate the surplus, or if the surplus will continue to grow. If what you've outlined will spend enough money to take full advantage of the mitigation fund.
That would have a lot to do with what lands get purchased. I can tell you that I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what development's going to do in the future. I can tell you that what I see in development going on right now, it has really accelerated recently. So the fund has accelerated a lot recently. What's going to happen in the future? Development may taper off, in which case the fund expenditures and the fund inputs may equalize a lot better. But, that's kind of predicting the future situation.
I was kind of curious, based off of past, if you could draw upon the past and make some assumptions, if you had projections for that.
I would say, just look at the situation in the last 3 or 4 years is when we've really seen a dramatic increase in development, a dramatic increase in the fund levels, and a dramatic situation with having to be able to expend monies in order to try to keep up with those inputs.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Maybe just to tack on to that, sort of again, to go back to just the canopy being the purpose of this. So if we are seeing development go on in certain areas that is requiring tree mitigation funds that go to it, one, those developments are required to provide trees, which in their full growth obviously will provide canopy, but also those developments are required to put money in towards growing new canopy. So what we're really trying to do here is create a better balance. Right now, we're seeing canopy go down, funds go up. And what we want to do is keep canopy present and funds present. And that's the intent of the language, to try to give us more tools to make that balance easier to achieve.
And I would add to that developments are required to put in street trees, but that's in the city right away. If I can plant trees in the front yard and the backyard, that's going to really help our canopy.
Thank you. Any other questions? And I only have one comment, is that I don't know what Ms. Sutton referred to on the front end, but I assume that meant reducing the charges that we make. And for me, the main purpose of the tree mitigation fund is to encourage development to work around their trees.
Yes.
And so it doesn't make sense to me that we should reduce the whatever we're charging for those trees now. I do think expanding the use of the fund in order to more rapidly replace the mitigation, the trees that we're losing, I think is an important thing. Any other questions? We'll open it to the public. Comments from the public on the on this tree mitigation issue? I'm sorry?
Good evening. Larson McBride. I'm a certified arborist. I live here in Gainesville. I'm also a member of the Tree Advisory Board. Just in response to the member's comment about potentially changing the current formula that we use to determine the appraised value, I would say that reducing it could have hazardous consequences. I think that in order to make it a more effective deterrent, maybe we could consider increasing it. I know that it's currently out of date as it is. And now if we don't increase it and we just leave it the same, I would suggest to maybe hold off on any changes to what you guys do on the front end and wait and see how these revisions affect maybe not the sum total of the fund, but perhaps just how much money the city's able to expend out of it. As you indicated, the rate at which money's coming into the fund may not continue to increase at a steady rate over time. At some point, it could level off. Development may not stagnate in the near future, but development where trees are being removed and money's being put into the fund, that could happen. And so I would suggest that maybe in order to be a good steward of the fund, we take a conservative approach, maybe not have the goal of completely emptying it out, but at least being, using more of it and, having more of an effect, taking money out of it. And I say that as a member of the public. I'm not here to represent the board, but that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Alina Cole. It's my first time. I was born in the duck pond in the 80s, and I've recently returned. And I have to say, I'm really shocked at how much the trees have been hacked up over the years with electrical lines. We have so many storms, and I just wish there'd be more effort made to help promote putting more things in the ground and not on lines, which means so much damage to the beautiful trees that I so love in Gainesville.
Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else on this issue? Don't be shy.
Thank you. My name is Corey Brunson. I have no relevant background or experience here, but I'm curious whether it would make sense and whether it's consistent with the remit of the fund to maintain a somewhat larger than the city is used to reserve pool in preparation for the potential more rapid impacts of climate change in the decades ahead. From the presentation, I see that there's updates made to the plan every 10 years, and in the coming century, the pace at which climatological impacts occur will be quicker than that. And so I wonder if that's an element that should be discussed.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? Mr. Edelton.
If there are no other public comments, if I could, didn't want to interject too fast, but.
What?
Awkward. So 2 points I definitely want to take the time to address. The utilities and duck pond neighborhood and undergrounding. Undergrounding of utilities is something that's in our code and is something that is important and put as a high priority within our code and for our development code. The challenge in the Duck Pond neighborhood is that it's already developed. So just to say that I think the goal is shared and that the city has seen that having above ground utilities is a risk and is can be damaged during storms, and in so much as the city has said that all new infrastructure and utilities for new development needs to be put underground. That's not going to make anybody feel better in the meantime in those places that are already developed, but it is something that is agreed upon and is shared. It's just sort of how do we do it with the things that are on the ground, and so that to be said, keep saying it and keep saying that it's important. For climate change is very important, and the city has put a very high level of importance onto climate change, in that we have just hired a new chief climate action officer, who is Dan Zhu, and previously was a planner in the in sustainable development and worked with our development review board, but now is working on climate change essentially exclusively. So happy to give those contacts and things like that, but the climate change implications of all of our decisions are being considered, are being heard, and are a part of sustainable development right now. And I think that the city is going to do more conversations about how our policy relates to climate change going forward, because we have to.
Thank you. Anybody else, please?
Actually, I wasn't planning on saying this, but my name is Maria Jones, and I'm, for instance, I own a home, and it's got large trees. But due to the fact that GRU's I'm planning on maybe cutting some branches and trees, because I think I'm going to have to put solar panels to be able to pay my bills, my GRU bills. Are you considering that at all? The fact that some people may need to cut down trees in their own property in order to put some solar systems? That's my question.
I can definitely connect you to the multiple staff that would help you out with that. For our arborist, for our urban forester, can connect you to staff at GRU that can look at that, and can also connect you to our historic preservation officer that may be looking at that if you're in the Duck Pond neighborhood. And at this point in time, the best that I can tell you is that we can put a whole host of staff to help answer those questions.
What I was trying to say is that we have to keep this in mind when we talk about the canopy, that there may be a lot of owners of homes that they may need to be forced to cut down their.
If you're going to be heard by me.
Sorry. Yeah, what I'm saying is that you have to consider this fact when you're talking about the canopy, that, in some areas, the canopy might need to be reduced because of the costs of electricity. That's all.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Please, don't be shy.
My name is Frank Reagan. I live in the University Park area, and I've noticed a lot of trees cut down mostly by in around rental homes that aren't replaced. A lot of them are cut down on the weekends. And in the past, I used to be a regular caller to report these trees, but sometimes there was action, usually not. And the idea of planting, using these funds to plant in people's yards, I can think of one in my neighborhood where the city tree folks planted 2 very nice live oaks. And they were probably about 35 feet tall, 2 of them. And those trees were cut down by someone who bought the house to use as rentals. And complaints were filed, but nothing happened. So I think that is something that we need to think about is perhaps better enforcement and maybe a better enforcement staff and maybe not one that's going to say, okay, you don't have to do it this time, but next time, whatever the situation is. But certainly the canopy has decreased in the College Park and particularly College Park area.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for comments or a motion. Ms. Sutton.
So I generally support the suggested changes here. I am interested in getting a recap, and maybe it's after these changes go into effect, of what money is coming in and what money is going out. I do think that we need to look at the front end. I think the city has a priority put on affordable housing, and when you have a development that has to pay $2 million in tree mitigation, the developer isn't taking that out of their profit. The people that are living there are paying that fee. So I think we need to understand that if we want affordable housing, we can't continue to just add more and more fees and increase fees. You don't get affordable housing that way. So trees are important. I'm curious about the numbers. I'd like to see, how this plays out. Maybe you can come back to us in a year and let us know, or when you have a fiscal year's worth of data. I do think that we should look at the appraised value and see if it should stay the same, if it should go down a bit. Probably not going up if we're going to have any affordable housing in this city. But I'm willing to make a motion to support the changes tonight. So with that, I'll move approval of 2023-166, the tree mitigation funds revision as it was presented by staff tonight, with the suggestion that we get a follow-up in a year or the end of a fiscal year with how it's going as well as how it was previous to this change.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.
And I can commit to at least getting you an accounting for what is collected for those fees, and that may help you, and we can get that very quickly.
And then we can get you an accounting of expenditures.
And I would be interested in seeing, once this rolls in, how much more is spent on acquisitions. I think that's the direction that we're headed, as I stated earlier, and I just would like to see how this plays out.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry? Thanks. That'd be great. Do the 3 minutes, too. Mr. Castillo, would you get us going on the next item? Thank you.
Item 2023-167, restoration of exclusionary zoning land use amendment ordinance. This is a direction by the Gainesville City Commission to rescind an ordinance that removed the exclusionary single-family future land use category from the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. Do I understand that next 3 items are going to be read as one presentation?
They're all one.
Okay. And so, Chair Ackerman, would you like me to read all?
Yes, please. Because I think they're
Yeah.
so related that he can consolidate his presentation and then we can go from there.
Item 2023-168, LD 23-000021, restoration of exclusionary zoning amendment ordinance. Direction by the Gainesville City Commission to rescind an ordinance that removed the exclusionary single-family zoning districts from the Land Development Code. And 2023-169, restoration of exclusionary zoning tax change amendment ordinance. Direction by the Gainesville City Commission to rescind an ordinance that removed or modified several sections of the Land Development Code associated with exclusionary zoning districts, including occupancy limits, bedroom limits, compatibility standards, standards for the division of property, and density and setback standards for some zones districts. And presenting for us today is Director Forrest Edelton.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Forrest Edelton, Acting Director for the Department of Sustainable Development. I'll be going through the exclusionary zoning and the request tonight, which is to restore the exclusionary zoning. If I could, I might wait to get a full screen here if possible. Thank you guys in the booth.
Booth people.
They're working on it. I see cursors. And it's a simple.
There we go.
Thank you. I'll see if this works. All right, I got it. Thank you, guys. This works. So, Forrest Edelton, Acting Director, Sustainable Development. I am in sort of a both uncomfortable but also luxurious position in that I get to talk about exclusionary zoning, which has obviously been extremely hot topic and politically hot, but also a whole lot of people have worked on this. And I get to stand on the shoulders of giants in a lot of ways here to go over some of this. So, you know, I could spend a whole lot of time talking about a lot of the detail, a lot of the data that's been gone on into this, but you all, plan board members, for the most part, have already gone into this. You've read it. You've seen my staff report. I will go into a little bit just to sort of say kind of, you know, how we got here. So there is a legislative history. This has been going on for a very long time now. The City Commission requested that staff look at housing in general. And how do we address and deal with our housing issues that, of course, are being felt across the country, but also in the city of Gainesville right now. So we started on a long process here, lots of meetings, lots of input, lots of different points to interject, to get involved. Also, the City Commission, in addition to asking staff to go and do their own professional research on this topic, hired an outside consultant, HR&A, to do their research as well. Really, a very big part of this entire conversation is that single-family zoning takes up a lot of space and takes up a lot of space in the city of Gainesville. And what do we do as the city of Gainesville to use our space effectively? So all of us, you know, we can get into argument, we can talk about the data. Of course, it's a popular thing to do is to argue about the data. The best thing you can do is to say your data's wrong or you need more data. We've done the data. We've presented the data. We've argued about the data. It's there in our report. It is there in the HR&A report. Staff supports it, and staff has done their research. The fact is, and has been shown, that, again, we have a space issue, and we have a need for housing. And I'm not getting my slide to thank you guys. So, again, timeline. We have talked about exclusionary zoning. We've talked about inclusionary zoning. This was all part of the same process. This was part of doing the research into housing in general. So we started May 2021 doing our demographic socioeconomic analysis. That was not just the consultants, which they did. That was also staff. Staff doing their own data, research, and analysis, doing it based off of what we know to be the unique parameters of our own city that we live in. And for me, myself, that I was born here and grew up in. We were asked to look at exclusionary land use and controls, and then shortly after that, realizing that that was not enough to solve our housing. That was too limited of a focus. So we were also going to look at inclusionary zoning. That started about August 2021. So we're looking at all of these things at the same time. This was presented as recommendations in between October and November of 2021. And you all have seen the recommendations. The City Commission has seen those recommendations. So I'm not here to, repackage what staff has already presented and what staff has already recommended. Staff recommends, and it continues to recommend, that removing exclusionary zoning is the best way to address the housing issues in the city of Gainesville. We continue to recommend that. So the summary of what HRNA and what staff has found is here on this slide and is in our report. And there are several different, actions and activities that we could address to try to solve our housing situation and make more affordable housing available for citizens in the city of Gainesville. So we have recommended through the 3 ordinances that have already been voted on and that were in front of you. And I now can talk about sort of the nuts and bolts of all of this. There are 3 ordinances. There's one, the first ordinance that establishes the land use and establishes the neighborhood residential land use that all of this can be built off of. Of course, our comprehensive plan and our future land use element is the foundation and is the base for what you all and what our city commission gets to decide as a legislative body what we and they think the city should be and should look like. And that's that first ordinance, and it's for the land use. The second one is for the zoning, and that is establishing that there can be more uses within this land use and zoning district, the neighborhood residential zoning district, more uses rather than just one family on one property. The third ordinance has more of the detail that is not normally talked about in this conversation. And it includes the bedroom limits, the occupancy limits. It includes removal of compatibility requirements in the zoning. So what had been traditional, if you will, is that if you are looking to provide more housing, you are required to spend more money to separate yourselves and your clients and your owners from the neighbor, from the people who may be living adjacent to you. So this really is to, the ordinance is to remove some of those costs, which we talked about earlier, that if there are costs to providing housing, like tree mitigation or like compatibility requirements or like several of the other elements that have been identified by that report and by staff, then we should do what we can to remove those obstacles, to remove those costs and remove those barriers. And that's what that ordinance endeavored to do. So with that, I think I've probably talked about it enough for all of you, and I will turn it all to you, and then of course to hear from the public and citizens at your will, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Edelton. Questions for Mr. Edelton? Mr. Sanchez.
I have so many questions for you, Forrest.
Well, have at it.
So the first one is, I was reading through your report, and can you just confirm this for me? It seems like advocating for the restoration of exclusionary zoning violates the American Institute of Certified Planners Code of Ethics. Is that correct?
That's absolutely true. When we're tested as planners, as certified planners, several of the questions that come up in that test refer to exclusionary zoning and removing exclusionary zoning in order to provide more affordable and accessible housing.
So by doing what the City Commission is asking, you were saying that you're carrying out unethical action here. Is that correct?
That's not correct. I can say that as a planner, we are required to act within our own ethics to support more affordable housing and to support removing exclusionary zoning.
Okay. I wanted to clarify some stuff because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about the neighborhood residential zoning category. Under NR, would someone still be able to build a single-family home in any of those neighborhoods that are zoned
Yes.
for NR? Would somebody be able to build a single-family home that is large, with setbacks larger than the minimums prescribed in the changes?
They would be able to build a single-family home and within the setbacks.
Okay. Did the changes affecting single-family homes affect any of the historic neighborhoods? As I understand it, the historic neighborhoods, many of them are already zoned for multifamily.
The zoning that would change would impact historic neighborhoods in that single-family zoning would be changed to this neighborhood residential, but that in of itself would not change or require any sort of development in those historic neighborhoods. And they would still be subject to historic preservation board review and things of that nature.
I'm thinking about homeowners in an RSF, or the old RSF. If we end up reverting back to RSF categories, are we in a sense sort of taking away rights from them to build, like, say, a duplex, convert their house into a duplex, or convert their house into a situation you're talking about, bedroom occupancy limits? Are we taking away some rights from them if we're limiting the zoning to just single-family homes?
Yes.
Are there changes to the maximums? I think a lot of people get hung up on minimum lot sizes, minimum setbacks, and I think a lot of people have this idea that it's going to take away their home or in some way affect existing homes. Homes that are already on large lots, homes with large setbacks, does anything change for them?
This will not require any property owner to do anything differently on their own property.
It's good to know. I'm curious, if we reinstate exclusionary zoning, what's the alternative? A lot of times you'll have, if we're going to get rid of a plan, there should be maybe an alternative plan already lined up. I think it's the staff's opinion that there's a affordable housing issue in Gainesville. I think that's kind of the view of most people in Gainesville. Maybe a couple of folks here might have a difference of opinion on that. Is there a plan that's an alternative to removing exclusionary zoning? Has there been, if we restore exclusionary zoning, has there been a plan presented that would address the affordable housing issue that we have in Gainesville?
We've got plans. And staff is good at plans, and planners are good at plans. The most effective power that a local jurisdiction has is land use. Flat out. And so that is what staff has recommended, is to use that power most effectively. We have lots of other plans for lots of other powers. They are not as effective.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Edelton? Mr. Day?
If we don't reinstate exclusionary zoning like if we don't take that vote tonight, does that mean, is neighborhood residential active now? Can somebody do this now? Or does this have to, I'm just wondering.
No. No is the short answer. The land use and the zoning portions of the first two of those ordinances are still in play, if you will, and they're being challenged right now in state court, and they are being held in abeyance while this process and what the city commission ultimately decides to do with zoning and exclusionary zoning plays out.
How long is this, the state keeping this in abeyance? Do you know?
It's in a pause right now, seeing what both the plan board recommend and then what ultimately this commission and the new commission decides.
Did they give us a date or anything, or no?
No. They're pausing it.
Mr. Day, you done?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Mr. Sanchez?
I got one more, sorry. Forrest, in your view, would restoring exclusionary zoning, would that violate the city's comp plan and some of the goals that are stated in the comp plan?
We have not evaluated that specifically on a comp plan policy by policy basis. There are elements within that comprehensive plan that require the city and staff to review housing or any sort of housing application in terms of, is it providing things like a variety of housing types or providing access for more people to housing in general. Yes, we do have those policies. Whether or not this reversing or restoring, if you will, affects those policies, I'm not prepared right now to give you a detailed analysis of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Edelton? Then we'll open this to the public hearing. Thank you.
I think we have cards.
Mr. Castillo will call the cards. Please restrict yourself to 3 minutes. Here we go.
Matthew Romanos?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me the time. So my first comments are going to be just my own. I'm not representing anybody. And I would just like to say, as a neighbor, a citizen, and a property owner, I think that they should not be put back in. The exclusionary zoning should stay removed. I think this would really help spur that missing middle and provide a lot of options that especially first-time home buyers may be able to take advantage of, and create that more density in the areas that we would like it. I'm also really excited for what that would mean for the community land trust. If they were able to create multifamily especially, but be able to take advantage of that aspect, and that would keep affordable housing in perpetuity. And then now I'm going to have some comments as a representative of the Gainesville-Alachua County Association of Realtors. We are in favor of keeping the occupancy limits removed. Do not want the occupancy limits coming back. The biggest reason is, again, affordable housing. We need the inventory, and when you have houses that are 5, 6 bedrooms, you need to be able to put at least one person in each bedroom. HUD says that you can put 2, but you need to be able to at least put 1. So that is the biggest comment, especially for students and seniors. I think that would be the biggest place where it would help alleviate some of that pressure. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Ari Rabinovich.
Good evening. My name is Ari Rabinovich. I'm here as a resident of the city of Gainesville and with Gainesville is for People. I'm here to urge the Plan Board to do what is in your power to prevent exclusionary single-family zoning from coming back to the city of Gainesville. I live in a neighborhood with exclusively single-family housing. It is beautiful and peaceful, and I would love for more people to be able to afford and enjoy that neighborhood. The only way for that to happen is to build more density through diverse types of housing, including missing middle and multifamily housing. A neighborhood is only as strong as its community, and we all have neighbors who struggle to make rent or pay mortgage, and like many of the other communities across the country, we have people who are one medical bill away from losing their housing. Our neighbors need our help, and we need to be leaders in change to help them. And we can help them by building more and dense housing. Homelessness, urban sprawl, climate change are all worsened by single-family zoning. And the International Panel on Climate Change recommended that we increase density to address the climate crisis. This is how we do that. Many generations of Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been excluded and impoverished because of single-family zoning, which has perpetuated systemic racism. By getting rid of single-family zoning, we have the opportunity to lead by example and to create a more equitable community. So I ask that you do what is in your power to keep this commendable change and do not bring back exclusionary exclusionary single-family zoning to Gainesville. Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Vishnu Malhotra.
Hello. Thank you all for hosting this and letting everyone give public comment. I really appreciate having that opportunity to speak here today. I am Vishnu Malhotra. I'm an 18-year-old resident in District 4 in the city of Gainesville. I'm also an undergraduate representative for UF Habitat for Humanity, and I'm a lead at Gainesville is for People. I'm here today to speak in favor of the repeal of exclusionary zoning. And I'm going to talk about just a few different things, and hopefully one of them sticks with every single one of you. So the first one that I want to talk about is environmentalism. And we were just talking about urban sprawl and how our tree canopy has been diminishing over time. And one of the ways that we're exacerbating urban sprawl is by keeping single-family zoning intact. It's an excessive government regulation that's proscribing one way of life for 60 or so % of Gainesville's residents. And the result is that all we end up doing is build outward and outward and outward. And it hurts me, right? Because I one of the things that I've really appreciated since moving to Gainesville is our nature and how I can bike or drive 10 or 15 minutes and be surrounded by beautiful nature. I go biking on the Gainesville Hawthorne Trail every Sunday with my friends, and I would hate to see more and more housing being pushed outward rather than upward, and in a way that people can choose where they want to live, versus the city of Gainesville saying, this is the way you must live, this is the only type of housing that you can build. That's environmentalism. The second and probably the most important one is affordability. And we have a serious affordability housing crisis, not just in Gainesville, but in the entire country as well. I know so many friends who are paying rents upwards of 10 to 15% more than they were paying the year prior, who are struggling, who are having a hard time finding affordable housing. And if we want to ensure that people can choose the type of housing that they want to live in and at a rate and a cost that is fair for them, let's let people choose where and how they want to live. Let's let people live in a duplex if they want to, or a quadplex. This decision is not taking away rights from anyone. Member Sanchez made a great point that this is not about restricting what people can do or assigning maximums or putting people into a box. It's exactly the opposite. It's letting people choose how they want to live. It is probably the most American thing this plan board can do, and that's one of the reasons that I'm here in support of it. And then finally, I want to talk about diversity, because almost all exclusionary zoning and many things on lot size, setbacks, minimums, all these different things were formed especially to exclude people from certain communities. That's fact. You can look it up. It's history, it's research, and it's wrong that we've continued to perpetuate it to this day. And the solution lies right in front of our eyes. We know that this is a government-created problem, and that by removing single-family zoning, we can create more diverse communities that are more affordable, limit urban sprawl, give consumers more choice, more affordability, and overall just create a much more communal, walkable, and denser city. So that's all I have to say. I hope you take my comments to heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Corey Brunson.
Hi again. I'm Corey Brunson. And I'd also like to urge the, I'm sorry, I'm still new with the language, but the committee to urge and do what they can to support retaining the removal of exclusionary zoning and the associated changes to zoning laws in Gainesville. The urgency of making housing and home ownership more available and more accessible is only going to accelerate in the coming years and decades. And the three changes made here, it's fairly clear to me, and I think clear to anyone who does the research with an open mind, are necessary and responsible with respect to climate, safety, financial security, and without trying to be melodramatic, human rights. Housing is a human right, and I think it's important to recognize that challenges to human rights come at different scales, to different extremes. You don't have to be literally thrown out of a home to have that right infringed upon. I myself am not particularly challenged. I'm a renter. I like living in a building with several neighbors that I can meet by walking right out my door. I would love to own a home, but I am not interested in owning a single-family home. I'd very much be interested in owning a unit in a quadruplex or duplex, and I'd be very interested in creating an HOA to build up a community like that, a small community of owners and neighbors in the city limits, well within the city limits, because I'm not interested in being an hour-and-a-half commuter because I live far enough out and much prefer to bike than to drive. I'm optimistic that zoning reform will return to your attention in due time if the current proposal continues on. And so as a separate note, I wonder whether it would be helpful to preemptively address some of the, I think, good faith concerns that have been raised by some in opposition. As I've said, I'm very in favor of increased access to home ownership, and I think incorporating paths to home ownership is very important when considering any change to the availability of housing. So if one is worried about developers coming in and turning owner-occupied units into absentee landlord units, then it would be nice to have means available at the ready to incentivize owner development, whether that's benefits for owner-occupied developers or landlord-occupied multiplexes, or subsidies for single-lot HOAs, or to give prospective owners cheap loans or right of first refusal for single lots that become available. I don't know the feasibility of these things, but I'd love to see that become part of the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Gerardo Rodriguez.
Hello, Gainesville City Plan Board. My name is Giancarlo Rodriguez. I'm a student at UF, and I'm here to speak in favor of inclusionary zoning and speak against going backwards to exclusionary zoning, a legacy of segregation. In our current housing market, UF students are pitted against Gainesville residents for a scarcity of homes, driving up prices and displacing residents. In order for this to stop, we need UF and local government to take on the responsibility of encouraging the building of more housing, especially affordable housing for everyone. Right now, housing supply is not meeting demand, but if we have citywide inclusionary zoning, our housing demands can be met, prices can go down, and no longer will students and non-students be pitted against each other to live in Gainesville. Single-family homes have their place in Gainesville, but we need more duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes if Gainesville wants to lower rent and displacement. Single-family homes are expensive, and having other options for families and the entire community is important, so they can build wealth in more affordable homes and then eventually live in a single-family home if they wish. Without duplexes and other multifamily homes, which tend to be cheaper than single-family, it is much harder for people to create wealth and have housing stability. In addition, right now, the east side of Gainesville is zoned more inclusionary and takes all the pressures of the housing market. By making the entire city inclusionary, the west side of Gainesville can do its part when it comes to housing. We've seen in cities like Los Angeles what happens when you build predominantly single-family homes. The city becomes expensive and for the rich only. Traffic worsens, it's dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists, everything becomes more than a 30-minute drive from each other, and homelessness increases. Florida cities like Gainesville are at risk to fall into the same problems as LA and other single-family dominated cities have fallen into. We need smart growth. Do not go back to exclusionary zoning, which in the long term will hurt Gainesville residents and lead to higher rents and more displacement. I ask you all to consider the people who aren't here in the room right now. the majority of Gainesville, working class renters, not homeowners, who need relief and affordable housing options. Inclusionary zoning is a necessary step for housing relief. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Casey Fitzgerald.
Good evening, Planning Board Chair and members. My name is Casey Fitzgerald. I'm a 29-year resident of Gainesville, and I currently serve as president of Gainesville Neighborhood Voices, a nonprofit organization formed last summer for two reasons. First, to oppose the highly controversial comp plan and zoning changes that were approved by the former City Commission that do pose an existential threat to Gainesville's neighborhoods, especially those most prone to gentrification. And secondly, to work with the City Commission, the Plan Board, and Gainesville's neighborhoods and other citizens to create meaningful, strategic, affordable housing in Gainesville in the future. Our message this evening is not to rehash everything that was done over the past 6 to 8 months. We simply want you to support the City Commission's complete rescission of the ordinances previously approved on October 17, 2022. This would be consistent with the new City Commission's actions taken on January 5th, 2023. Doing so will reset, which is what we need to do, the situation here on the comp plan and rezoning situation. The Gainesville community desperately needs that. The controversy, again, was very traumatic for many folks. Even some of the commissioners, new commissioner that probably is in favor of many of these things, said it was handled poorly and it just should be redone. So doing so would restore faith by the community in the governance of the city of Gainesville. And once that complete rescission is accomplished and the pending litigation currently held in abeyance is formally dismissed, then again, the commission, this plan board, and the community at large can start with a clean slate and modify ordinances as needed to significantly enhance affordable and workforce housing. The folks that have spoken earlier, some a few years younger than I, did have some very good ideas. Some commissioners or some of your plan board members have some very good ideas, and all those should be dealt with, but in a forum that is appropriate, a workshop forum, and one where we can all start again from square one. I do think you really just need to take seriously what, the commission that voted on this took this very seriously. This was the #1 issue during their entire campaigns. They took it very seriously, and they took a vote on January 5th to restart and come back with a clean slate, and we hope that you would vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Gary Ayers.
Thank you. Yes, Board Chairman, Board. My name's Gary Ayers. I lived in Gainesville for 47 years, so I think it's my home. I have lived in all kinds of housing in my somewhat long life, and I think it would be hard to argue that what Gainesville did with this broad brushstroke of basically wiping out the single-family zoning obviously had some casualties, maybe too many to mention. Most of them probably unintended. The first item on the agenda tonight was very representative. All of a sudden, you're striking out lines in the code that make it so we can put in utilities. It's sort of typical, right? You want to develop, but you need infrastructure. Boy, with what we have coming towards us, it's going to be difficult. I want to talk about one specific casualty, and that is conservation land. Most people don't know that the conservation land in this town is zoned for 1 dwelling per 5 acres. Right? It's not free of dwellings. And that's what really keeps it clear, because it's not worth developing. It's usually lowland. It's not in a good location. So with one stroke, the conservation lands were wiped out, and along with them, the animals, the water flow. You can shake your head no, but yes, I'm sorry.
It didn't affect conservation zoning.
I'm sorry, I went to the Thomas Center, I talked to staff. They said it's affected. They said that the conservation lands are really protected because you don't allow multifamily dwellings. So you're gonna lose your canopy on all those conservation lands. You're gonna have traffic problems. You're gonna have infrastructure problems all over the place. Guess what? I think you all know how this all came about. It wasn't Gainesville's doing. It came about because a long time ago, we decided that money talks. And if you want an example of what will happen in Gainesville if you leave this non-exclusionary zoning in place, look at what happens to towns where VRBO has taken over, where everybody has turned every spare room into a rental. There's no infrastructure to cover it. There's not even enough police. And that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to fill the lands with apartment buildings. And it's just going to be a mess. So we need to step back and start over, as previous speaker said. And thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Peggy Carr.
By the way, when you're speaking and there's somebody shaking their head no, I think that's rude. Right there.
Mr. Ackerman and members of the Plan Board, I'm Peggy Carr, and I'm here to ask you to support the City Commission's proposal to reset these three ordinances. I don't think I'm going to change anybody's mind with my testimony, but I would like to just offer one observation. I think zoning is a covenant between government and people. And I think many folks who live in neighborhoods that are currently zoned single family would like the right to speak in favor or against a proposed rezoning that would affect their property directly. And with the proposal that has been moving forward, that opportunity, that right of those individuals to speak about specific rezonings is, as it relates to all the single families, being taken away because it's being made in one big fell swoop by changing all of that zoning to neighborhood residential. And I really think that I hope you'll consider this point because I think it really is a sea change in the opportunity for people to participate in government and to participate in defining the quality of the neighborhoods that they live in. And I believe that that's a very important ethical opportunity for your citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr.
Next, we have Kim Tanzer.
Good evening, Plan Board members, and thank you for rescheduling your meeting this evening from last Thursday's meeting. We appreciate it. As you know, I would ask that you resend the ordinances at the request of the City Commission. I know that you will vote how you're going to vote. I'd like to just remind you that the slide that Mr. Edelton showed this evening from HRNA was a draft proposal for discussion, and throughout their report, they called for more data and analysis. I want to remind you of some things that report, as well as the city's report, have said. First of all, we're talking about 20% of the city's land, which is all residential categories. Of that 20%, 60% or so is single-family zoning. The remaining is multifamily zoning. As we break it down further, 30% of the Gainesville residential land, 30% is missing middle. 1/3 is missing middle. 1/3, 30%, is units more than 10, so 11 plus units per acre, and 40% of that 20% is single-family zoning. And in that 40%, many homes have accessory dwelling units historically. Those haven't been mapped, so we have no idea as a city how many accessory dwelling units there are within the single-family category. And I say that because there's been a lot of, there have been many assertions that are based on, an optimistic goal or series of goals that are unproven. And I think we need to start by looking at what has been done, what's worked, what has not worked. What we see is that across the country, initiatives such as this have not led to more affordable housing. They haven't led to much more housing at all. And in Gainesville in particular, because of where the vacant land is located, our most vulnerable neighborhoods, as happens other places, will be snapped up and turned into expensive developments. And so the very people that you say that you want to help, namely people of color, will be those who are displaced. We already see this happening in Pleasant Street and in Porter's Quarters and in Fifth Avenue. So I hope that you will support the City Commission's recommendation, start again, and work with people in the community to make decisions that are customized to Gainesville, which is a college town of 134 or 40,000 people, of whom almost half are students. This is not Minneapolis, this is not Seattle, this is not Los Angeles. This is a very strange mixture of populations, and we need to customize our strategic decisions in land use and in other ways to fit our circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tansen.
Next up, Robert Mounts.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. First thing I would say is that despite the city attorney's advice to the city commission, I've scoured the municipal code and state law, and I find no justification whatsoever for this action to go back to staff and the plan board to start all over again. It's not there. If you can find it, give it to me chapter and verse. I cannot find any justification for it. In my belief, the city commission has the legal authority on its own volition to repeal these ordinances. And they have so directed. You know, people have used kind words, recommendation. It wasn't a recommendation. Even the staff report says that on January 5th, the city commission directs staff to draft ordinances that would rescind the prior ordinances. And I see no need after an election where this was the number one issue with all candidates and where both in the runoff for mayor, both were opposed to it, both promised to repeal it. I see no need now for all the arguments for and against. But it would have been nice if Mr. Edelman, in his Longstaff write-up about the principles that he says he adheres to now as a matter of ethics, if you had, as a matter of ethics, included the opposing arguments, the pushback from the state, pushback from the county commission, all of this, we know it, you know it. This is not the time to have that discussion anymore. And I also noticed that with all the backup, there is no ordinance repealing those ordinances. All there is a copy of the 3 packages that were already passed. So I would say it borders on insubordination, Mr. Chairman. You know, if Mr. Edelston was working for me and this happened, he would be fired.
Thank you for your
visiting us in
comments.
Gainesville.
Mr. Edelton, did you have something to say?
Edelton. And also a couple of points. Conservation zoning is not at play here. That, as you all know, is not up for discussion. It's not affected by this. I'm also the environmental planner for the city of Gainesville. I have been the senior planner for the Alachua County Environmental Protection Department. And I also have been, I have earned my specialization as an environmental planner from University of Florida. Some of the faculty that are here right now. The best thing to do for our environmental concerns is to remove exclusionary zoning. It's a fact. It's been put out there by a variety of well-respected sources. The best thing that an urban area can do to lessen the impacts on valuable resources outside of urban areas is to increase the density and increase the people and the services that are provided in a small, compact area rather than incentivize small land use that grows outward. It's a fact.
Thank you, Mr. Edelton.
If I can also, a couple of other ones. Very similar is the impacts that are faced by our neighborhoods and our vulnerable neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods were intentionally zoned multifamily years ago, while at the same time zoning other areas for single family. That was done to exclude people from owning large property and large homes and to force more people into multifamily zoning areas. That is a fact. We have done the research. That is why the zoning was put into place in the city of Gainesville. Our historic neighborhoods and our historically black neighborhoods are feeling pressure right now. Gentrification is happening right now. We think as a planning department that that pressure is happening because that is the most valuable place to get the most people to live, because they are excluded from everywhere else. That is the pressure that's being felt on our neighborhoods. Some of our other neighborhoods have done things to protect themselves from that. The Duck Pond, our historic neighborhoods have their own historic districts where extra development is required to go through extra review, extra scrutiny, because that is intended to be extra protection. That is not afforded, unfortunately, to our historic neighborhoods that are historically black. And that has likely been done because of a distrust and a disconnect between those that would protect their single-family neighborhoods and those that would or would not protect our historically black neighborhoods. These are going on right now. The gentrification is real. We want to address it. We have talked about things that we can do to address it. Again, from planning staff, the best thing that we think we can do to alleviate the pressure on our historically black neighborhoods is to provide opportunity in other places. And those are in our single-family districts.
Thank you, Mr. Edelton.
I mean, the speaker knows that there's
Okay,
Mr.
we
Nay?
can't make this a personal conversation, guys. None
Yep.
of this is personal. We just need to
Let's
listen.
just,
Everyone has the right to speak.
everybody, let's just calm down and continue with the public hearing. Mr. Castillo.
Next speaker, Andy Coffey.
Andy Coffey. I think he
Said
gave
he
up.
went home earlier.
Okay, next.
Next speaker, Alina Cole.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak on this. I have two major issues with exclusionary zoning, and that is one, from your research, I am sure you're fully aware, it was started specifically to create segregation. And it has historically done just that. So the fact that we're even considering going back to the old ways blows my mind. Gainesville has always been progressive, and I'm so proud to be part of this city. And when you see other progressive cities who have done just this, who have changed their system to eliminate single-family zonings, you see unbelievable data, vast amounts of data showing the great benefit it has drastically changed socioeconomic situations where you have a much more diverse socioeconomic class, racial classes, and there is so much data showing how beneficial that is to communities. And I don't know what these other people are talking about. There's so much data out there to prove that. I wrote an email where I put a lot of that data in there to support my argument. So on the one hand, there is the clear racial background of this horrible single-family zoning. And on the other hand, we have the future. And that is, we are trying to be more environmentally friendly. We are trying to create more affordable housing. And eliminating that does those two things. It is so detrimental to the environment, urban sprawl, and high-rises. So creating other forms of living situations within an existing urban area clearly is the only option. And I understand, my background is social work. I understand change is hard, right? It's scary, clearly, from what we've heard from the public. It is scary to change. And so maybe there just needs to be more education from the city what exactly it means for someone who has a single-family dwelling. What is it going to actually do for them? Because clearly they don't know exactly what it's going to happen because of the fear in their voices. And, you know, knowledge is everything. So hopefully through a little more education as to what the changes are going to be and how it's going to affect them, population is going to be a little more on board with change, because that is the only way forward. I really hope that the board makes a educated decision as to how to bring our city into the future responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Chuck Ross.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to make our comments. I have to change everything I said based on the last conversations I heard. First thing I want to say that I'm in support of what Casey Fitzgerald and Kim Tanzinger and Peggy Carr and this gentleman, I don't know his name over here, says, in that the way this was all brought about and is not going to help create affordable housing in this city, because one of the things that you can't control at the local level is who owns a property and what they do with it. So if you have developers that want to come in here and they want to create rental properties, you can't stop them. You can't require that the property be owner occupied. So because of that, you have an issue. This lady that spoke before me talks about the data that she's read. I've read the opposite. I've read that this doesn't work, that it's a trickle down. Basically, it's trickle down economics. or they compare it to Reaganomics. You know, you can't, building more housing doesn't necessarily make it affordable. And this experiment, which is what it is, because in a city this size, you know, they tried this in Minneapolis, they've done it in Oregon, they've done it in New York City, and I've read that the results of several years of this, it just hasn't worked. In fact, in some cases, it's created more affordable, more expensive rental property, or rental costs rather. And the property values have gone up because the developers come in and they see, look, what they can do, because it's developer driven to take these properties. And that's what I understand how what's going on. It's not creating affordable housing. What I was going to talk about briefly was that the fact is, what the city is faced with, aside from all the other issues that have just been talked about earlier today, where there's financial issues that need to be dealt with GRU, et cetera, is that the Department of Economic Opportunities, the DEO, basically told the city to withdraw the plans. The letter specifically states, I have it here. The recommendation at the end of the letter from the Department of Economic Opportunity, dated September 8th. The amendment must be withdrawn while the city continues to consider a sound planning approach to provide access to affordable housing in a manner that will be strategic and focused and based upon sound planning principles that will actually produce guaranteed affordable housing that is accessible from the city's employment centers and not in such a careless way that will result in the opposite effect than the purpose it was proposed. The county came out and said they were against this. You know, I can't speak as well as some of these other people have spoken earlier, but the best thing to do, as I believe Casey said, was reset and let's see what we can do to try to create a more comprehensive approach that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Castillo?
Nancy Morris?
Good evening. I'm Nancy Morris, and I am rather surprised to hear all of this kind of rehashing. I have been very involved in this whole thing, and I kind of thought this was just going to be a very quick meeting where you guys would support what the City Commission had recommended very strongly. And so to hear this whole thing all over again is kind of surprising to me. I do want to say I think there have not been enough studies done. I think we do need to go back, start all over again. And I know for a fact in my neighborhood, there's flooding already when there's a heavy rain. GRU never really supported the whole thing. All the studies, all the recommendations said we need more studies. I think we need to just slow it down as a lot of the City Commission voted. We need to slow it down and do more studies about the infrastructure. Talk to the people. I was one of the people, I rode around to various neighborhoods with a petition, and a lot of the people were not even aware that this whole thing was going on. It's gone through too fast. We need to include more of the community. I know that a lot of the African American folks, who I'm real surprised aren't here tonight, were quite upset. They were losing their homes. Their family fortunes are being bought up by big developers. That is untenable. We haven't really proven this is going to provide affordable housing. That's the main thing. That's the irony of all of this. There's no proof that we're going to get affordable housing from this. So I think we need to respect what the City Commission said. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Castillo?
Those are all the cards we have.
Is anybody excuse me, I don't get to talk, so my voice gives up. Anybody else wish to address this issue?
Good evening, Board. Nicholas Hill, 934 42nd Terrace, Gainesville resident, very proud. As a planning consultant myself for local governments all over the state, I can confidently say that virtually all of them, just like Gainesville, are in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. Because the communities where we work are often afraid of things like density or traffic or a supposed loss of character, their resulting housing policies in their comprehensive plan, land development code, and maps are often incremental and contain provisions which keep their single-family neighborhoods untouched and homogeneous. And after years of working in this field, I can tell you the incremental approaches to increasing the housing supply of our communities is not enough to address the housing crisis. I know because our communities have told us. And I applaud the city's efforts to remove exclusionary zoning and their commitment to make Gainesville a more equitable community. And I would love to stick around for the rest of these items, but I promised my son I would give him a bath tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else like to comment? Don't be shy.
Good evening, Planning Board. My name is Andres Martinez. I'm not a Gainesville native. I moved here from South Florida, so I have seen firsthand what happens when you have communities that are built entirely with single-family housing, and it is expensive. And there, at some point, like in South Florida, you reach, there's also like a national limit as well because of the Everglades, but there is an added effect in how communities are planned and are designed. But there's also the concept of how developers plan for their projects, right? When they look for opportunities to plan different developments, most of the time, especially if they're larger development groups, they're going to have optimized supply chains. They have all their vendors figured out. They have all their suppliers figured out. They have a formula for what they're building, right? So D.R. Horton, for example, is one of the major manufacturers of housing in this country. They have optimized all their supply chains for single-family housing. They have optimized their people supply chains, their material supply chains, right? Sure, in the short term, right? We mentioned Minneapolis, since we want to use research studies, right? Minneapolis also has real data. There has been an analysis thus far. Sure, within the zones in which they modified the zoning, it did increase the price of housing by 3 to 5%. But that is also only the 40 units that are the 40 permits that they actually issued as of like a study, I think in 2021. None of these things happen overnight. This is not going to materialize in Manhattan being, the Manhattan skyline being replicated here, but with like a Florida paint on it, right? So I think if we're worried about the character of our neighborhoods, right, essentially removing single-family zoning won't result in this overnight change. And additionally, right, when you change components of any system, and if we think about Gainesville as a system, we're changing a major component, which is the zoning component. That we still don't really know what the full effects of this will be, right? And I don't think that what the city commission nor the planning department or nor any of our other city staff have proposed, and in this zoning ordinance change, I don't think that they've indicated that they're unwilling to make modifications, right? So if we see in the future that there are issues that could pop up because of this, I don't think that they've indicated they're not willing to address those in the future. So I think by this, we're able to remain flexible to future situations and future issues that come out of this. So I would please ask that you do not revert the decision, and uphold the current decision to remove exclusionary zoning. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Edelton?
There was a comment about the CEO letter, and just wanted to say that our city attorneys have crafted a response to that letter.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion.
I mean, by all means.
Mr. Nay.
I just wanted to apologize. I should not have had an outburst.
No, you shouldn't have.
I shouldn't address or argue with people.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez.
So, I guess my issue with this is that there doesn't seem to be an alternative. So we know that affordable housing is an issue in Gainesville. I think it's very clear, right? You guys on the city staff would have made that argument repeatedly. Mr. Allison says that we've got plans. I would love to see some sort of alternative. Like, if we're going to go through something and do what is a pretty big change in zoning now, because this has been passed by the previous commission, with the goal of addressing housing issues in Gainesville by creating more supply, or incentivizing, I should say, the creation of more supply. It would be good to see what the alternative is. I think we hear a lot about wiping the slate clean, but then what? Gainesville historically hasn't been very. We've had this battle for a while, and I don't see how it would be not a battle with certain alternative plans. I think even something as modest as Commissioner Eastman's plan to allow smaller single-family homes, that turned into a battle for some reason, a reason I can't personally understand. So I'm reluctant to take this up, to vote on this either way until I sort of see an alternative from city staff of, okay, if this is repealed, what's next? What does it look like? What are we doing to address the housing issue? I don't want this to be a thing where, and basically in Obamacare Part 2, where Republicans were promising, we're going to repeal and replace, but they never revealed a plan to replace. I think it's very important for us to get this right and to see a plan of, okay, if this is repealed, here's the alternative that would satisfy some of the folks that are here that are in favor of exclusionary zoning, and some of the folks here also that are in favor of removing exclusionary zoning. Is that something that you think city staff could? I can respond in just sort of general to that. So if it is reversed, then we go back to what we all know as the status quo. We are continuing to work on inclusionary zoning, which would apply to new developments that are 10 units or more that would be required to incorporate this affordable housing element, depending on where the city commission lands for which percentage of AMI. We've talked about doing smaller lot sizes. We've talked about doing, decreased setbacks, which is in the third ordinance here. After land use, staff's ability really starts getting into that, basically that third ordinance, where we start trying to find setbacks, where we start trying to find smaller sections of code, if you will, to have some sort of efficacy. And the land use, again, is the way that the city as a municipality is the most effective. And we're still waiting to hear back from you guys on inclusionary zoning, as I recall. Right? That is working through, meetings. It will come before you all, and it is going before workshops and the city commission for what does that afford, or the inclusionary zoning look like? Is it 10 units plus? Is it less than 10 units? Is it 60% AMI? Is it 80% AMI? There are still several policy nuances to work out for that, but it's on its way. It strikes me that if we restore exclusionary zoning, if we basically take away zoning as a mechanism for creating more housing, that this inclusionary zoning aspect, this plan that you guys are working on, it becomes basically the sole mechanism or the primary mechanism, I should say, for increasing affordable housing stock in Gainesville. It's the primary mechanism for specifically affordable housing by its definition for affordable housing. Then it does not directly address housing and housing affordability and availability. And both our own research and the HRNA report show or have argued that inclusionary zoning by itself is very, very limited in its effect on the overall housing.
I mean, obviously we all have opinions on this thing. This thing's been around. Like, I do find it a little funny to hear that there weren't workshops and all that. I think you documented a timeline that was pretty thorough of a lot of workshops. This has been written about probably more than any issue in Gainesville. I don't know, since going back to probably I know some UF football issue or something. But like, I think everybody kind of has a thought and opinion on this. My view on the board is that sometimes the city makes mistakes, and I think in this case rescinding it would be a rather large mistake, and it seems that that is also the view of staff. Whether you guys out and out say that or not as a mistake, I understand you have certain responsibilities. But reading between the lines, that's what it seems like to me. And it seems like it's our duty on the plan board to make sure Gainesville doesn't make planning and development mistakes. I think that's one of our core functions, right? And so that's my view, is that I think the city is making a mistake here in voting to reinstate exclusionary zoning. But further, I don't feel comfortable voting on this until I see something, whether it's IZ or something else, because otherwise it is a repeal and replace sort of thing where the replace is, I don't know, I haven't seen it. I think there are groups that, I know there's a group that's involved in a lawsuit with the city that has also said, we will come to the table with alternative plans. But we've been talking about this issue for a long time, and I think the moment for alternative plans was basically every time up to and including now. And we haven't seen it. There just hasn't been anything pushed about that. And I would like to see an alternative plan come to the board. I think the board works great when we can weigh things, we can weigh options. This or this, this or this. And in this case, it's a yes or no on something that affects the entirety of the city without an alternative. And that seems, to me, frankly, pretty reckless.
Thank you. Mr. Torres?
I have no doubt that the city will repeal its repeal of exclusionary zoning. So I appreciate the pivot towards structuring discussion surrounding alternatives, because while I would vote in favor of repealing exclusionary zoning, the commission's going to do whatever it wants. So yeah, I want to echo Member Sanchez's sentiment of like exploring different alternatives to the single proposal. I think that'd be a better constructive use of our time here today, instead of wasting all our time just like arguing our opinions that have not really changed on the issue since it started.
Thank you. Ms. Sutton?
So there's some new members of the board here, since this was last before the board. So I just want to explain my thinking, which is the same as the motion that essentially came out of the board back then. My thinking on this has not changed. I agree with a lot of the text changes and a lot of the principles and a lot of the things that we're doing to make the lot splits easier, to make it easier to do some of those things, lifting the bedroom limits, things like that. I support all of that. I think the challenge comes in with the community, and Bob and I have seen this. This is the third round of it now. We were here for the form-based code, we pulled the neighborhoods out. We were here for Gainesville Rise, that died. This is the third round, and I think what we need to hear from the citizens is that we need to take a little bit more of a nuanced approach in the map changes. And so previously when the plan board voted on this, and this is what my recommendation would be to do again tonight, is I support the creation of the neighborhood residential, the land use and the zoning category. Create it, but do not rezone every single family property in the city to that. Leave it as an option, allow it as a, the city has the flexibility to let people rezone to that for free if they want to. Say, we're going to consider it compatible with single family. If you want to do something in a neighborhood, you can come in and ask for a rezoning. We can also do something like allowing the small scale multifamily as a special use, or just having it as a way that it can happen in single family. There's a lot of ways to get to this, but with a little bit more nuance. I think we just need like one more nuanced step before we start seeing this everywhere. And my concerns that I expressed a lot earlier are around the infrastructure, and whether, you know, specifically neighborhoods where we're going to see a lot of demand for this, the places that we're already seeing a lot of redevelopment, Porter's, Fifth Avenue, places like that, whether they can support what might come with this. So the transformers, the upgraded water lines, the stormwater. I have a lot of concerns about certain neighborhoods being hit really hard and needing infrastructure updates. And you heard some of that with the first item tonight. So my preference, I agree with a lot of what's in here. I don't oppose the creation of the neighborhood residential zoning. I just don't like the like mass changing of 60% of the land use and zoning, where a lot of people live and where they've lived a long time. And they, you know, I support staff going in and we can look at areas of the city to rezone to this. We can let people rezone to it if they choose to, consider it compatible with single family residential, and move forward without removing single family residential, but adding this as a additional land use and zoning category. So that's where I stand. I think the challenge comes in with the large scale map amendment. And I understand, you know, the planners aren't going to feel like they're getting their substantive change with that, but it's a step in the right direction. It creates the category. We can see what happens. We can encourage areas of the city or neighborhoods to rezone to this after more conversations with them in a up close personal way of what it might mean for their neighborhood. That's my preference. And that was what I voted on before. That was the recommendation of the plan board moving forward previously. And I still support that.
Any other comments from the board? Mr. Sanchez?
So I can get on board with that. I think it would be easier to start with, we have NR and we've done this thing, and then we kind of go piece by piece, and if we need to pare back some things, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think this idea that we should throw every single thing out and start from scratch, I think it'll basically be impossible to get some of the changes that people want to see. And again, I point to Commissioner Eastman's proposal for smaller lot sizes, smaller single-family homes. It was basically a non-starter, despite it being something that would actually promote more single-family homes and no multifamily, right? So my opinion is if we were to do changes to this, and I think that there is a lot of ground between rezoning, 60% of the city, rezoning none of the city. There's 60% to work with there. I think it would be better if we started with this framework and started paring down to get to a place where I think a lot of folks can agree on versus we start at zero. I think it's much harder to start at zero than it is to start with something finished.
Can I ask you a follow-up question on that, Forrest? So when we did the form-based code, we pulled U1 and U2 out completely. There is U1 and U2 in the city right now. Do you have any idea what percentage we've gotten to in U1 and U2? I'm sure it's low, but there are portions of the city that have gone to U1 and U2 in that amount of time. We didn't do it with a massive code change.
I believe there's 0 U1, and for U2, the only U2 that exists is what we as staff have initiated.
And where is that?
In the new annexed parts and new developments, brand new developments.
There's also a little bit in Midtown, the Midtown area.
For U2?
I mean, like College Park, like as a transitory.
Right.
Because the other thing is we have U1 and U2 categories that are remarkably similar with some tweaks. You get them to neighborhood residential. Now the front setbacks are different because you have the transect zone requirements on the front, which are tricky, and I don't see how you can require that in all the single family neighborhoods. But, the smaller setbacks and there is sort of that single family transect as well. And so I think we have to sort of wrap our heads around, where maybe we need to implement that in some other areas. Maybe the neighborhood residential is a better fit in, the neighborhoods that are further out from where most of the transects are. I think there's more detailed work that needs to be looked at the map other than just seeing, you know, a big picture that shows all the yellow that we're gonna change. I mean, there's 4 single-family districts now. I understand a lot of the issues with exclusionary zoning. I don't think that you can treat every neighborhood in Gainesville the same. So I think that there are some different options in the code now with U1 and U2. I don't oppose creating neighborhood residential. I just oppose changing 60% of the zoning of the city to that without fair representation of all those homeowners. So.
Thank you. The hearing's closed. The hearing's closed.
Could I respond to Mr. Sanchez, one quick point?
1 second.
Okay. So the point is, the reason that we need to go back to square one as opposed to doing this massive rezoning is if it's rezoned, you can't back off of it because it would be a downzoning. Are you familiar with the Burt Harris Act?
Yeah, but I still don't think the city will do anything if we.
Well, I think if there's an increase in density, then it would be very difficult to back off of that as opposed to taking an incremental approach, as Ms. Sutton suggested. Thank you very much for allowing me to say.
I do want to compliment her on one thing.
Let's try not to get into it.
I don't want to get
All
back
right,
and forth. I do
fine.
want to compliment on one thing that she pointed out earlier, which is having neighborhoods. This could be a potential alternative: is having neighborhoods decide whether they want to have multifamily. Right? I think that's something that I've read that's similar to what happens in Houston through HOAs, through deed restriction. Each neighborhood basically can allow whether they want certain usage or not versus a sort of blanket rezoning. I think if that was a plan presented to us, then maybe we could weigh these plans and consider them. That's, you know, like, I think it's a little silly that, like, I can come up with a plan in like 5 seconds right here. That's like the start of an alternative, but we haven't really had that discussion around alternatives. I think Member Sutton had some really great points, and also, again, a great alternative, the start of an alternative plan. And I think it'd be great if we could have more of that in weighing this, you know, deciding to reinstate exclusionary zoning, and then we could have these other plans that are sort of like that. And here's what's next. Here's what we could do. Here are the steps that the city could take that are palatable, that would address housing issues.
Any other comments, or do I hear a motion for something?
You've been awfully quiet tonight.
Well, I have been quiet, but, you know, there's just a lot of misinformation here. We've been doing this since last February. And so, you know, we evaluated a lot of data, and so far, nothing has really changed from the vote we took last fall on this, and so I'm not sure why it's hard for me to say, okay, everything they told us before wasn't true. It is true. It hasn't been refuted. And we just don't like it. You know, it's a political issue, and regardless of what we decide, it still goes to the city commission. So, you know, that's where we are. On the other hand, to slightly answer Mr. Mounts, the reason that it's back here before us is because under the state statute, the city plan board is the local planning agency. And so we have to initiate these various things. It doesn't mean that the city commission has to listen to us in most things. That's just where it is. And so whatever we decide in this specific issue, it will be right back before the city commission in a while. And currently this is all paused, so there's no rights vesting under Burt Harris or anything like that, and I'm sure that's going to continue depending on where we go. Anyway, that's what I think, and I would be happy to have a motion of some sort from somebody.
Do you have an idea?
I mean, I don't know what people support. I support continuing this item because I don't think we're gonna get to a place tonight. We're allowed to hold this item for a little while. We have multiple new city commissioners and maybe their votes will change.
So would you like to make a motion to do what?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to continue. Do I have to write?
If you, well, you know, we can continue the whole thing
Yeah.
if you get the support of the board for this.
Can I make a motion to continue? All
Yes,
items?
all three items, because they are completely tied.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion to continue this item. Do we have a second?
Can I ask for clarification? Are we asking staff for something specific to be
Well,
brought up to us different? Because this is, like, what the city commission wants to do is not going to change.
Right.
I hear you on maybe
Well,
they'll change
maybe.
their mind, but
I don't know.
they ran on this issue.
I don't
And
know if they
think they're-
did. I don't think so.
So I don't know, and you know, to Mr. Sanchez's point, you know, it's a little disheartening that they didn't look more and consider Mr. Eastman's suggestion as a possibility. Like, that was a little disheartening, and I think the thought was, you know, we just need to repeal this and then we'll start over. But that's a legitimate thing to do. It's a big part of what we're trying to accomplish here, is those reduced setbacks and smaller lot sizes. So I worry that we're not going to get them to focus on any of those other issues until they like check this off their list, unfortunately. Yeah, I've suggested to staff that we have a joint meeting with them to go through priorities and possible text amendments like we have done in the past, and come up with a big list and prioritize them between the plan board and the city commission. And maybe, you know, setback reductions are on there. Maybe, you know, there was a whole host of things before. I think we had like 30 items or something in the past, and we checked through them. So I think, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I almost wonder if we can't get there until we have that joint meeting. And we sort of have a set of shared priorities that we're committing to go down the path of doing some text amendments to adjust. And I don't know if staff can give us an update on where that idea of a joint meeting might stand.
We are working on a joint meeting for the comprehensive plan, but a joint meeting for exclusionary zoning and or a joint meeting for inclusionary zoning and whatever else we have not gotten very far with.
I don't know other board members' thoughts on this, but I think it's hard for us to go to the comp plan without knowing the direction that we're going here. The inclusionary and exclusionary zoning is, and I always had a problem with it being separated from the comp plan process, because we're clearly changing 60% of the land use in the city separate from a comp plan amendment process. And I can't understand that. I've always had a problem with that. I've brought it up numerous times. So I have a hard time thinking that the comp plan meeting with the commission is more important than this. I think we need to wrap our heads around this and where this commission is at on these issues before we can move forward with the comp plan. Personally, I don't know if others agree with that.
Mr. Sanchez?
I agree. I do think it's important to have that meeting with the commission to get a conversation going with them, and also maybe that'll satisfy my need for some alternatives being presented. The one thing I will say that it makes it difficult. It's a lot. This is a huge package, and there is a lot in every single. You know, we had 3 items that we just grouped all together, and there's a lot in there that I think we could chunk out and split out. And maybe some commissioners like this bit, but they don't like this bit. Maybe they don't like the whole package together. Maybe some folks in the audience here don't like the whole package together, but there are some parts of it that we can agree on. And I think it would be productive to have that conversation with the commission to see what it looks like if we split it out. And are there points here that there's more agreement on, more so than just 3 votes or 4 votes. And I think that would then present us a way forward where we could feel comfortable taking an action one way or the other on the full package of everything. So if we could get some idea of when we can have that meeting with the commission and make it a priority, I think that would that'd be extremely helpful.
Yeah, at your Mr. Chair, your direction or request, we can certainly try to, or continue to set up those joint meetings in a broader way for whatever it's worth. You know, of course, you all are the advisory and the advisory body. And a lot of times, and in other jurisdictions that I've worked with, really that commission is looking for you all to provide your expert opinion and analysis before it gets to them, not work on it together.
So we've already voted on this once. They have I mean, the board members were different, but they have a recommendation from us on this exact proposal. My vote hasn't changed. The members have changed, and maybe the overall vote has changed, but I think a lot of the discussion that we've heard is similar. So I think in this case, because we're doing this repeal thing, that doesn't apply as much. I think we need to get on the same page. There's enough big issues going on with inclusionary zoning, exclusionary zoning, that like we need to set some priorities with the new commissioners. And it was successful in the past. I'm not making this up. Like, we had a big list of items. We prioritized the text amendments. We all voted on them at a joint meeting at the GRU admin building. And we got through it because staff knew it was a priority to both boards. And we held you accountable. And Thomas made you come back and give us updates every couple months. So
I think we still have Thomas's list somewhere.
yes, so it's the same list. But we need a new list with the new board members and the new commissioners. So
Okay,
that's
we
my
have
thought.
a motion on the table to defer this to sometime. And, or we could defer it and allow staff to bring back some proposals to go with this. Help me here, Forrest, what are we doing?
I think the joint meeting is sounds like a good next couple of steps. I mean, to, I guess, be frank, we can come back with alternatives. We have presented alternatives.
How about if we vote, go ahead, Ms. Sutton, if we vote to defer till next month and see if you can set up a meeting in the meantime? I think that would help us.
I feel like this is like deja vu all over again.
Yeah.
You brought us this big package before, and you said, split this up. We want to vote on these things separately, right? So you brought it back to us in like 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. I don't remember how many, because we asked for that, and now it's all together again. So I feel like what we're hearing is we need it split up again. I mean, we just go in these circles. I feel like I'm crazy. So I think we need it split up. I think we need to talk about the different items separately. We can't roll in lot split modifications to the process with like rezoning 60% of the city. Different conversations. So I think splitting it up and having those conversations is helpful. And I think if we can have a joint meeting and get a sense of where all the new people stand on those, was it 7? I think it was 7 things when we split it up. On those 7 things, plus anything else that we think might be helpful. You know, Mr. Eastman's recommendation that he brought up at the commission meeting. But let's just talk about those in pieces.
Yeah, and Juan, please correct me if I'm wrong. You know, we did bring it as part of a bigger package, like you said. Then we did break it into pieces, like you said, and then we were asked to put it into a package. And so staff did that, and we were required to.
Okay.
And so we did, and then now we were asked to present something that is repealing all this. We could have done it as one, but that would not have been as clear or clean for addressing the individual ordinances that were passed, the 3. So then we broke it into 3. But now, certainly, and for right reason, we're hearing to split it up again for additional conversation. We definitely can do that.
So do we still need to second that motion?
Yeah, nobody was saying that.
I
I
don't-
think we need to provide direction
Yeah,
in the motion.
I think
it
Like,
does.
are we waiting until we workshop with the commission? Are we doing it to the next meeting? Are we asking for things to be split up? Like,
We should modify.
I think
the
we
motion.
need some direction within the motion, because just continuing it and getting this back in the same format next month, I don't know that we're gonna accomplish anything else then.
Would you like to modify your motion?
I'm fine with modifying it in with,
Okay, why don't we start over?
Let's start over. Let's go.
You can withdraw your motion.
it's all withdrawn.
Okay, anybody else have a motion?
So I'd like to make a motion that we continue this item, probably not until next month, to be honest, probably until the following month, because I think it's more valuable for us to have a joint meeting with the city commission before we try to pick this apart and decide what to do with it. Because I think it's part of a bigger issue. It's part of a bigger issue. We have this comp plan thing going on over here that we're trying to keep it separate, which doesn't make sense to me. I think we just need to have a big picture conversation and figure out where this commission's going and what their priorities are, so that we can do this in the right way. So my preference is to continue this. If it's easier to I don't know if you need a date certain for advertising purposes for this one. If that helps you, I would say 2 months. That should give us time to have a meeting with the city commission by then.
2 months, I believe we have to advertise again anyway. It might be,
Oh, do you?
which is fine.
I don't think we're gonna accomplish anything next month if we don't have a meeting before then. I know scheduling is tricky, so I'm open to that timing changing, but I think we really need to have a joint meeting before we can make progress.
Ms. Sutton,
And have a
feel free to make a motion.
Oh, I did.
I thought she was making a motion.
I was
wasn't
making a motion.
That was totally.
And
I was
what-
trying to refine the timing.
Seconded.
Okay. We have a motion to defer this to at least April,
I think
okay,
so.
to our regularly scheduled meeting in April. And we have that motion, and that is with direction to arrange a joint meeting so that we can begin to pick out the parts that we want to deal with or not. And then, do we have a second for that?
Second.
We have a second from Mr. Sanchez. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of deferring to our next regularly scheduled meeting
Not April.
in April? Thank you. Say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. We've deferred it until April. Thank you very much for you all coming today. And that makes Channel 20 miserable.
I feel like I was rambling a lot today. No, I was
All over again and again.
rambling.
You've been at this for I hear.
No, that's my hot-headed.
I just want to
Because
comment that
we've done
the
this
city
so many
commission
times. It's frustrating.
They don't really have a choice.
And we've
If
already.
we don't send anything, we're the local planning agency.
They have 45 days to do this meeting.
Well,
If you guys don't send anything.
well, we'll see what they do then. That's not my problem.
I just want you to know.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and you know what? The attorneys can make them do anything in any kind of settlement that they come up with too. So that's fine.
I just want you to know.
Nothing's happening. Yeah, nothing's
That's fine.
happening. Thank you.
We're used to being ignored.
Excuse me, the meeting isn't actually over. If y'all would sit down or go outside. We now have member comment. Okay, anybody have a member comment?
I'm out of words.
Okay, our next meeting date is sometime in March, the fourth Thursday in March. Yeah, okay. I'm going to declare this adjourned if nobody has anything to say.